In 1973, in England, a man known only as Mr. Y submitted a story to the Bufora Journal, a publication of the British UFO Research Association. Mr. Y himself had a couple of strange encounters with apparent extraterrestrials. On an evening drive from Brading to St. Helens in 1970, for example, he once witnessed a spacecraft with bright red lights that followed him parallel to his car, hovering along the banks of the River Yar, somewhere between the road he was on and Bembridge Downs. You might be thinking that this was the story that moved Mr. Y to contact the UFO Journal, but in reality, he did so only when his young daughter, known as Faye, told him of a strange encounter with a mysterious entity that she had had while playing with her friend, only a couple of miles from where Mr. Y had seen the mysterious craft only 3 years prior. In May 1973, Faye, 7 years old, and her male friend of about the same age were on vacation at Lake Common in Sandown, Isle of Wight. The children were playing when they heard a sound like an ambulance siren, which they followed to a swampy field near Sandown Airport, cutting through a golf course to get there. Upon entering this field, they found the siren noise had stopped. While they were investigating, trying to find the source of the noise, the children walked across a bridge that extended over a stream. Suddenly, a 3-fingered hand in a blue glove appeared out of the water below them. The hand belonged to a strange figure who emerged from underneath the bridge holding a book. He dropped the book into the water and spent some time clumsily splashing about in the stream trying to retrieve it. The figure was extraordinarily strange in his appearance, as described in the Bufora Journal. He was about 7 feet tall and had no neck, his head apparently wedged onto his shoulders. He wore a yellow pointed hat that interlocked with the red collar of a green tunic. A round black knob was affixed to the top of his hat, with a wooden antenna on either side. His eyes were triangular, his nose a brown square, and his lips round, motionless, and yellow. His skin was pure white, and he had circular markings on his cheeks. His clothes were ratty and torn, and he was barefoot, with 3 toes on each foot to match the 3 fingers on his hands. Perhaps strangest of all, he had wooden slats protruding from his sleeves and the bottom of his pants, appearing overall like some sort of demented clown marionette. After retrieving his book, the clown-like entity bounded with his knees raised up high, making his way to a plain metal shed with no windows. He emerged with a microphone in hand, attached to some sort of amplifier, and the wailing siren-like noise returned, this time blaring loudly, which caused the children to run. The clown spoke into his microphone, asking a seemingly obvious question. "Hello? Are you still there?" The children were yards away from the clown at this point, but somehow heard his voice as if he were right next to them. The kids, no longer afraid, decided to approach the figure. The clown communicated by writing in his book, seemingly still damp from the stream. He wrote down a series of words, apparently in a random order. He pointed to each word in the order they should be read, and Faye read each word he pointed to. His message was, "Hello, and I am, all colors, Sam." The children began asking the figure questions. They asked why his clothes were so ruined, and he said those were the only clothes he owned. They asked if he was human, and he said no. They asked if he was a ghost, and his cryptic reply was, "Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way." The children then asked what he was if neither a human nor a ghost, to which he replied with only the words, "You know." He said he did not have a name but called himself Sam. He said there were others like him, and he drew one such being in his book to show the children. He said also that he hid because he feared humans would harm him if they saw him, But he said if he were attacked by humans, he would not fight back. While all this was happening, 2 workmen were repairing a post nearby, and they didn't react at all, acting as if they couldn't see Sam or the children. Sam invited the children into his metal hut, which they entered by climbing through a flap in the side. The home was divided into 2 levels. The first level had some sort of electric heater and a basic wooden table with chairs. The wallpaper was green and blue, and covered in a pattern of dials. The second level was more cramped and had a metal floor. Inside the hut, Sam removed his hat, revealed round white ears and a balding head with patches of red-brown hair. He told the children that he had a camp on mainland England that he visited sometimes. He explained that he drank water from the stream but had to purify it first, and that he ate berries he collected in the afternoons. Sam's way of eating berries was strange, to say the least. He demonstrated this to the children, putting a berry in his ear and then thrusting his head violently forward so that it traveled to one of his triangle eyes. He then repeated the motion, and the berry fell into his mouth. The children chatted with Sam for 30 minutes before leaving completely unharmed. They ran back across the golf course and back to Lake Common, and they told the first adults they saw that they'd encountered a ghost, but they were laughed at. Faye waited 3 weeks after the experience to tell her father what she had seen, perhaps worried he wouldn't believe her. He initially thought that his daughter simply had an overactive imagination, but the details of her story, and her insistence that it was true, made him begin to think that perhaps Faye really had seen something, perhaps someone in a costume. But then he thought about the detail of the figure having 3 fingers on each hand, and 3 toes on each foot, which would have been difficult to fake. He talked to Faye's friend, who was less willing to talk about the experience, but eventually confirmed that she was telling the truth, and that he had seen the clown too. Mr. Y then began connecting his own experiences with strange, apparently alien craft to what Faye and her friend had seen. To this day, the children's encounter remains unexplained. Mr. Y even visited the site where it happened, and he found no sign of Sam's metal hut, or any indication that any metal hut had ever been there. Further, the workers who had been fixing a post in the area said they'd neither seen nor heard anything. So, what are we to make of Sam the Sandown Clown? He did confirm that he was not a ghost, but was, in an odd sort of way, which might be a reference to his nature as an interdimensional being. His reply of, "you know," when the children asked what he was, suggests to me that he was saying he'd already told the children what he was, all colors. Perhaps this meant that he normally cannot be seen by human eyes, like certain colors that are imperceptible to us. Perhaps the children had crossed into an alternate dimension, one where neither they nor Sam were visible to outsiders, like the workers who were repairing the fence. Sam's low-tech and mundane items like his book, his basic furniture, his microphone, and his electric heater would seemingly suggest he was not from an alien race, at least not an advanced one, unless all these items were part of a disguise. Perhaps Sam himself was wearing a disguise. His face could have been a mask, and perhaps it possessed technology capable of testing the toxicity of the berry he'd inserted into his ear. The way Sam moved, by hopping like an astronaut on the moon, might indicate that Earth's gravity affected him differently, as if he were indeed an extraterrestrial. I also like a theory I heard from the Kryptonaut podcast, that Sam was an artificial being sent to study, collect, and examine the toxicity of Earth's water and plant life, like some sort of walking Mars rover. Whomever or whatever Sam was, we know he was definitely unsettling, even if he was harmless. Certainly he was a forerunner to popular images of horrific clowns we know well today, like Pennywise, an interdimensional being himself. This story certainly gripped me when I first heard about it, and I'm sure it'll stay with you too for all its odd, seemingly nonsensical details. Thanks for listening, guys. Stay safe out there. Steer clear of any scary clown standing on your street corner. And remember, don't get scared out of sorts.